She stood up at my own engagement party, in front of 200 people, and said I wasn't good enough for her son. She said it with a smile on her face. And everyone laughed. That night, I promised myself something. I promised myself she would regret those words for the rest of her life. And she does. Every single day. Hey guys. Before I start, if you've ever been humiliated by someone in your own family, someone who is supposed to love you, I need you to stay till the end. Because what I did next, it wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But it worked. And I'm going to tell you exactly how. My name doesn't matter. Let's just say I'm 25 years old, and 3 years ago, my life changed completely. Not because of a wedding, not because of a promotion, but because of one woman who decided I wasn't worthy of her family. Let me take you back to the beginning. The girl who wasn't enough. I grew up in a small town. Nothing fancy. My parents worked hard. My dad drove a delivery truck. My mom cleaned houses on weekends to help pay the bills. We didn't have much, but we had love. Real love. The kind that doesn't need a big house to survive. I studied hard. I got a scholarship. I worked 2 part-time jobs through college just to help my parents out. By the time I was 23, I had a decent job as a marketing coordinator. Nothing glamorous, but it was mine. I built it with my own hands. And then I met him. Let's call him Daniel. Daniel was sweet. Funny. He made me laugh on days I didn't think I could laugh. We dated for a year before he proposed, and I said yes, without a second of doubt. I thought I had found my person. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that his mother had a very different idea of who her son should marry. You see, Daniel's family had money. Not billionaire money, but comfortable. His mother, let's call her Diane, came from what she liked to call a respectable family. And in her eyes, respectable meant status. It meant connections. It meant a daughter-in-law who came with a name people recognized. I came with none of that. I came with a work ethic, a kind heart, and a mother who cleaned houses for a living. The first time I met Diane, she looked me up and down like she was inspecting a piece of furniture she wasn't planning to buy. She asked me what my father did for work. When I told her, she just said, "Oh." That's it. Just, oh. And then she turned to Daniel and started talking about someone else's daughter. A doctor, apparently, like I wasn't even in the room. I told myself it was just one bad first impression. I told myself she'd warm up to me. You might be wondering how I could be so naive. Honestly, I think I just wanted so badly for it to work out that I ignored every warning sign in front of me. I was wrong. So wrong. The slow poison. Over the next few months, Diane didn't stop. She never yelled at me. She never called me names. That would have been too obvious, too easy to point at. No, Diane was smarter than that. She humiliated me in small, quiet ways that were designed to make me feel crazy for even being upset. She'd accidentally call me by the wrong name at family dinners, the name of Daniel's ex-girlfriend, the doctor's daughter I mentioned earlier. Every single time. Then she'd laugh and say, "Oh, sorry, sweetie, I always get confused." Sweetie. She called me sweetie like I was a child, not the woman about to marry her son. She'd comment on my clothes. "Is that from a thrift store?" It's very practical. She'd comment on my job. "Marketing coordinator? Is that like an assistant?" Every sentence was a small cut. And because none of it was ever loud enough to call out directly, I started to feel like I was losing my mind. I never thought I'd say this, but I started doubting myself. I started wondering if maybe she was right. Maybe I wasn't good enough. Maybe I really didn't belong in that family. I told Daniel about it, more than once. And here's the part that still hurts to say out loud. He brushed it off. Every time. "That's just how my mom is," he'd say. "She doesn't mean anything by it." Or, "You're too sensitive. She loves you. She just shows it differently." I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. Because the alternative was admitting that the man I was about to marry either couldn't see what was happening, or didn't care enough to stop it. But the worst moment, the moment that changed everything, happened at our engagement party. The night everything broke. We had rented out a small event hall. Family, friends, coworkers, about 200 people. It was supposed to be one of the happiest nights of my life. I remember getting ready that afternoon, looking in the mirror, actually feeling hopeful for the first time in months. I thought, maybe tonight, Diane will finally accept me. Maybe in front of everyone, she'll say something kind.
She did say something.
Just not what I hoped for. Diane stood up during the toasts. She had a glass of champagne in her hand, and that same tight smile she always wore. She talked about Daniel as a boy, about how proud she was of the man he'd become. Sweet, normal stuff. And then she looked directly at me. "And I just want to say," she said, her voice carrying across the whole room, "that Daniel has always had big dreams. I always imagined he'd end up with someone who matched his ambition. Someone from a family with, let's say, similar standing. But love makes us do surprising things, doesn't it? Sometimes we settle for what makes us happy instead of what makes sense." The room went quiet for a second. And then, and I will never forget this sound as long as I live, some people laughed. Not everyone, but enough. Enough for me to feel 200 pairs of eyes on me, waiting to see how I'd react to being called a settlement at my own engagement party. I smiled. I actually smiled, because what else do you do? I raised my glass like everything was fine, and inside I felt something break. You know that feeling when your whole body goes numb, but your face still has to perform? That was me for the rest of that night. Smiling,
Nodding.
pretending, while the woman who was about to become my mother-in-law had just told an entire room of people that I wasn't good enough for her son. Daniel apologized later that night. He said his mom had too much champagne and didn't mean it like that. But I knew better. I had seen the way she said it.
Calm. Calculated.
She meant every single word. That night, lying awake at 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling, I made a decision. I wasn't going to cry about this anymore. I wasn't going to shrink myself to fit into a family that had already decided I didn't belong. I was going to do something. I just didn't know what yet. Rock bottom. Here's the thing about humiliation. It doesn't just hurt once. It echoes. For weeks after the party, I felt it everywhere. At work, I'd catch myself replaying that moment during meetings, losing focus. At home, I stopped wanting to see friends because I was scared they'd ask about the wedding, and I didn't know how to explain what had happened without sounding dramatic. I started pulling away from Daniel too. Not because I stopped loving him. I did love him, that part never changed, but because every time I looked at him, I saw someone who let his mother humiliate me and called it just how she is. Diane didn't stop after the party either. If anything, she got bolder. She started helping with wedding planning, which really meant taking over. She told the caterer to change the menu without asking me. She invited 15 extra guests from her side of the family without telling me. When I brought it up, she said, "I just assumed you wouldn't mind, since you don't really have that many people to invite anyway." That sentence. That one sentence about my family, about the people I loved, the people who worked their entire lives to give me a good one. That's the sentence that pushed me over the edge. Because here's what Diane didn't know about me. I'm quiet when I'm hurt, but I'm not weak. And when someone insults the people who raised me, something in me shifts from sadness into something much colder. Something focused. I didn't yell at her. I didn't cause a scene. Instead, I went home that night and I started paying attention. Really paying attention. To everything Diane said. Everything Diane did. Every conversation, every comment, every little joke at my expense. Because I had realized something important. Diane's whole identity was built on her reputation. She was the head of 3 different charity committees in our town. She hosted the biggest holiday parties. She was on the board of the local country club. Everyone respected her. Everyone thought she was this generous, graceful, elegant woman. Nobody outside that family had ever seen the real Diane. The one who humiliated a 23-year-old girl at her own engagement party and called it a joke. I decided it was time people saw who she really was. The turning point. Now, before I go further, let me be clear about something. I didn't lie. I didn't make anything up. I didn't need to. All I did was make sure the truth reached the right people. It started small. Diane had a habit of gossiping, cruelly, about other women in her social circle. Behind their backs, she'd say horrible things about their weight, their marriages, their children. I had heard these comments for over a year, always assuming they were just Diane being Diane. But this time, I started remembering them, writing them down after every family dinner, every phone call, every visit. Then I started noticing something else. Diane loved to present herself as this pillar of generosity through her charity work. But I had overheard, more than once, her complaining to Daniels and about how much of the charity money she used for her own events, her own dinners, her own little luxuries. Nothing illegal, necessarily, but definitely not what donors thought they were funding. I didn't do anything reckless. I didn't hack anything, I didn't fabricate anything, I didn't threaten anyone. What I did was much simpler and, honestly, much more effective. I started talking, quietly,
Truthfully. To the right people.
I reconnected with a woman named Carol, who sat on the same charity board as Diane. Carol and I had met once at a fundraiser, and she'd always seemed sharp, the type of woman who noticed things. Over coffee, I mentioned gently some of what I had heard about the charity funds. I didn't accuse. I didn't exaggerate. I just said what I knew and let Carol draw her own conclusions. Carol, it turned out, had already had her own suspicions. My information was the final piece she needed to start asking real questions. I also started being honest, genuinely honest, not vindictive, with people who asked me how wedding planning was going. Instead of smiling and saying great, I started saying things like, honestly, it's been a bit hard. Diane has strong opinions about everything. Simple, understated, but true. And truth, when it's consistent, spreads on its own. Word got around the way it always does in small, tightly knit social circles. One conversation led to another. The women on Diane's charity board started comparing notes. Old grudges resurfaced. People who had quietly disliked Diane for years finally felt safe saying so out loud because someone else had spoken first. Within 2 months, Diane was quietly asked to step down from the charity board, pending a review of the fundraising accounts. Within 3 months, the invitations to her famous holiday party stopped going out because nobody wanted to be associated with her anymore. The country club friends who used to fawn over her started keeping their distance. I want to be honest with you here because I promised at the start of this video I'd tell you the truth. I didn't feel guilty. Not for a second. Every single thing that came out about Diane was already true before I ever opened my mouth. All I did was stop protecting a woman who had never once tried to protect me. The fallout. Diane, of course, blamed me immediately. She showed up at our apartment one evening, furious, accusing me of turning her friends against her. I remember standing in my own doorway looking at her and finally, saying the thing I had swallowed for over a year. I didn't turn anyone against you, I told her. You did that yourself. I just stopped covering for you. She didn't have a response to that. For the first time since I'd met her, Diane didn't have a clever comment, a fake smile, a backhanded compliment. She just stood there, and for 1 second, I saw something on her face I'd never seen before.
Fear.
Fear of being seen for who she really was. Daniel and I had a lot of hard conversations after that. He was angry at first, not at his mother, but at me, which honestly broke something in me all over again. But slowly, as more people came forward with their own stories about Diane, he started to see what I'd been trying to tell him for over a year. His mother wasn't just difficult. She had been cruel to people for a long time, and everyone had just let it slide because of her charm and her reputation. We postponed the wedding. I need you to know that. This story doesn't have a perfectly clean bow on it. Daniel and I spent months in therapy, individually and together, trying to figure out if our relationship could survive what his mother had done and what he had allowed for so long. What I learned. I'm not going to sit here and tell you revenge is always the answer. It's not. And what I did wasn't really revenge in the way people usually mean it. I didn't destroy anything that wasn't already broken. I just stopped hiding the cracks. Here's what I learned through all of this. Silence protects the wrong people. For over a year, I stayed quiet because I thought that's what a good future daughter-in-law was supposed to do.
Smile. Nod.
Absorb the humiliation gracefully. And every time I did that, I gave Diane permission to do it again. The moment I stopped protecting her reputation was the same moment I started protecting my own peace. I also learned something about the people around us. Diane's charm worked for so long because nobody ever compared notes. Everyone assumed they were the only one being treated that way, so everyone stayed quiet, the same way I did. The second people started talking to each other honestly, her whole carefully built image collapsed, because it was never real to begin with. And I learned something about myself too. I'm not someone who screams. I'm not someone who causes scenes. But I am someone who remembers. I am someone who pays attention. And when it matters, I know how to use the truth like a tool instead of a weapon I'm ashamed to hold. Where I am now. It's been almost 2 years since that engagement party. Daniel and I did get married eventually, in a small ceremony with people who actually respected me. Diane wasn't invited. That was Daniel's decision, not just mine, and honestly, that meant more to me than any apology ever could have. Diane still lives in the same town. She's not the woman she used to be, socially speaking. She lost most of the status she spent decades building. I won't pretend that doesn't feel like some form of justice, because it does. But more than that, I feel free. I don't shrink myself in rooms anymore. I don't smile through humiliation and call it grace. If you're watching this and you recognize even a little piece of your own story in mine, if there's someone in your life who's been humiliating you quietly, consistently, and telling you it's all in your head, I want you to hear this clearly. You are allowed to stop protecting people who never protected you. You don't have to be loud. You don't have to be cruel. You just have to stop staying silent. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply tell the truth, consistently, to the right people, and let it do the rest of the work on its own. If this story meant something to you, I'd really love to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever had to stand up to someone in your own family who tried to make you feel small? What did you do? I read every single comment, and honestly, hearing your stories helps me heal a little more too. And if you want to hear more real stories like this one, hit subscribe because trust me, this isn't the last difficult chapter of my life I'll be sharing with you. Thank you for listening. And remember, you are allowed to take up space in your own life. I'll see you in the next video.